The Armed Forces Pension Scheme 2015. Love it or hate it, you're on it. You may as well understand it. Hey everyone, and welcome to The Savvy Squaddy. In this video I'm going to explain the AFPS15, which is the current pension scheme for all those serving in the UK Armed Forces today. I have done a previous video where I looked at the 75, 05 and 15, but that is quite a few years old now, in need of updating, and I can explain it better. Plus, as of April 2022, everyone still serving is on the AFPS15 due to the 2015 remedy. If you joined on or after the 1st of April 2012, then don't worry, you're not affected by this remedy, but if you think you are, I have made a video explaining it all, which I will link below in the description. I won't be going into detail on the legacy schemes in this video. Check out my old pension video if you want to learn about them. This video will cover the broad basics of the AFPS15 with a bit of detailed analysis so you can have a good understanding of how it works and how it affects you. I can't cover every personal scenario and circumstance. If you're looking for personal professional pension advice, then seek out the Forces Pension Society. They do have an annual fee, but it's worth it in my opinion, and it doesn't break the bank. This will also be quite a long video. There are timestamps in the description so you can skip to the parts that you want more clarification on. So, over 50% of the UK Armed Forces joined in the last 8 years, meaning the majority of the military are only on the AFPS 15. They have no accrued rights on the legacy schemes. I highlight this because I have lost track of the number of times I have received messages from young people who think the pension scheme is rubbish. When pushed, they're unable to tell me why they think that, but instead reply, "I don't know, my senior just says it is," or words to that effect. This is genuinely sad to hear because you have seniors, who probably don't know the details of the legacy scheme that they are on, telling junior soldiers that their pension is rubbish. You don't really need to think all that hard to realise that this has a detrimental effect on young, impressionable junior serving personnel who look up to their seniors, see them in a position of authority, and so take their word for it. A failure in leadership in my opinion. This is the first job for most who join the armed forces, and from a young age they are exposed to one of the best workplace pension schemes available. For individuals to then tell them that their pension is rubbish without even an understanding of the scheme is not only disheartening but also perpetuates a cycle of misinformation. But this is why this video needs to be made, because young people don't understand how good the AFPS 15 actually is in comparison to other available workplace pension schemes currently on offer out there in the big wide world. And that is what the 15 should be compared to, not the legacy schemes that the majority of serving personnel would have never been entitled to. I get it, most young people aren't thinking about retirement, let alone their pension. With life and adulting in general, pensions often take a back seat. But guess what? When you eventually get to that point in your life, you'd sure as hell wished you took it seriously when you were younger. It may not be glamorous, there's no instant gratification, bragging about it isn't really social media worthy, and it can be quite boring, if you're normal that is and not like me, but it is necessary to have a fulfilled, stable and secure retirement. You can't rely on the state pension, so therefore you require either a personal or workplace pension, or both. The onus is on you to make it happen. No one will do it for you, and you'll only have yourself to blame when you get to the golden years of your life and find you still have to work just to keep the lights on and food on the table. Right, let's get into it. So in 2011, Lord Hutton's Independent Public Service Pension Commission recommended that all public service pension schemes should be reformed, and this is where the AFPS 15 arose from. In short, the reasons were people are living longer and therefore the cost of the legacy schemes would be too much to upkeep and become unsustainable for the taxpayer. As an example, in the financial year ending in 2022, the MOD's total workforce costs were £10.4 billion. Over a third of this was for pensions. That's nearly £4 billion. Anyway, the reforms happened, a bunch of the public sector pension schemes changed, mainly to save money, and we got the Armed Forces Pension Scheme 2015, which is still one of the, if not the best workplace pension scheme currently available. Check out this chart in which it compares the AFPS 15 to the other public sector schemes. Ours wins out on all categories bar one, and even then, it's second. Okay, cool, but what is the AFPS 15? Well, it's a voluntary, non-contributory, career average revalued earnings or CARE unfunded defined benefit occupational pension scheme. Blimey, that's a lot to take in. Let me explain each of these, as it's very important you understand what this means. First up, voluntary. Pretty self-explanatory. You can opt out of this pension scheme if you choose, and whilst there may be a few edge cases where this would make sense, for 99% of people, you'd be a fool to do so. Non-contributory. Well, this means that we, as the employee, don't pay a penny into our pension. This is very unique and a great benefit. All other public sector job roles require their employees to pay part of their pay into their pension, but not us. And this is the same in the private sector, and the percentage of the pay contributions varies with employer. Career average revalued earnings, or CARE. I'll cover this in more depth in a bit, but this is pretty much how the pension is calculated, which is according to your average earnings over your career, which are revalued each year in line with the earnings index. Unfunded. This means that the government does not set aside a pension fund to meet the costs of pensions, but instead plans to pay for them out of general taxation as they come due, typically decades in the future. This is in stark contrast to most civilian pension schemes, in which both the contributions of the employee and the employer are put into a specific pension fund for that individual, and it is that pot of money which the retiree then must live off. Defined benefit. This is the type of pension plan we are on. Defined benefit pension plans are very rare these days. They are the gold standard of pensions. Pretty much a DB pension plan means your employer, in this case the MOD, promises to provide you with a specific predetermined amount of money as a pension for life once you retire. The risk here lies with the MOD and not us, the employee. Compare this with the alternative, which is a defined contribution pension plan. The majority of civilian workplace pensions use a DC plan. Here, both the employee and employer pay into an individual pension pot, which is then invested. Come retirement, this pot is then used as income for the retiree. The value of the pension pot at retirement will depend on the contributions made, investment returns, and fees. The pot must also be distributed appropriately over the course of one's retirement. This means that the final pension benefits are not predetermined, as they depend on the performance of the investments in the account and the method of withdrawing. The risk here lies with the employee and not the employer. In 1997, almost 40% of the private sector had defined benefit pension schemes. This is now around 7%. Why? Because these schemes are bloody expensive to the employer, and they no longer want to carry the risk that comes with them. Easier and cheaper to palm that off onto the employee. So don't take your AFPS15 for granted, because guess what? You'll be hard pressed to find anything like it elsewhere. And also to note, pension scheme changes also happen in Civvy Street. It's not limited to the public sector or the armed forces. And finally, the last part of that statement, occupational pension scheme. This just means it's a workplace pension scheme that was set up by the employer, the MOD, to provide retirement benefits to us, the employees. Understanding these fundamentals of the AFPS15 is hugely important. Without this context, you will not be able to make properly informed decisions which will affect you in later life. Right, now that's nipped, let's talk about membership. So how do you know if you are a member of this pension scheme? Well, if you joined the regular or reserves on or after the 1st of April 2015, which the majority of those currently serving did, then you are on the AFPS15. Now, those of you who joined beforehand, like me, you still have rights to the legacy schemes you were initially on, and they will be honoured under their rules. However, as of the 1st of April 2022, every serving person is on the AFPS15. There are 3 types of members: active, deferred, and pensioner. Active simply means you are still serving and building up your pension benefits. Deferred means you are no longer serving, so you're no longer building up your pension benefits, and you are not in receipt of your pension. And pensioner means you are receiving your AFPS15 pension. So is there a certain amount of time you need to serve to be eligible for the AFPS15? In short, yes, there is. However, it is not 12 years. I say this because the amount of times I've been asked by people if it's true that they need to serve 12 years to be eligible for a pension is shocking. This is false, even with the legacy schemes. For the AFPS15, you need to have 2 years of qualifying service, also known as paid service. the timer starts ticking from day 1, week 1. So if you do your minimum of 4 years, then you'll be entitled to a pension, albeit a small one. In the 2022-23 financial year, nearly 2,000 people did not meet this qualifying service criteria due to leaving before that 2-year point. That could be because of injury, getting caught, or decided it wasn't for them during training. In summary, serve at least 2 years, then you've got yourself an armed forces pension. But when can you claim that pension? Well, if you happen to serve until what is called normal pension age, then you will receive your pension immediately upon leaving. Sounds good, right? Yes, until you consider that normal pension age for uniformed services is currently 60, and the likelihood of those of us who are serving in the armed forces still being employed in the armed forces at 60 is hugely improbable. So chances are pretty much all of you watching will not receive an immediate pension from the AFPS15 when you come to leave, even after a full 24-year career. There is a separate benefit for that interim period, which I'll come on to in a bit. As most of us will leave before normal pension age, we move from being an active member to a deferred member of the AFPS15, and this has a different age limit as to when you can receive your pension. And that age is linked to the state pension age, which currently, for most people serving, is 68. I say currently because chances are this will increase by the time most of us get to it. I'm currently 28 and I fully expect state pension age to be in the 70s by the time I get there. With all that said though, you are able to claim your pension early from the age of 55, but it will be at a reduced rate due to being paid out over a longer period of time, which makes sense. And how long is the pension paid out for? It's for life. So in summary, if you serve until you are 60, then your pension will be paid immediately upon leaving. If you leave before the age of 60, then you will become a deferred member and the pension will be payable at state pension age, whatever that may be when you get there. And if you can't wait, then you can claim it from the age of 55, but at a reduced rate. Okay, how do you claim your pension though? Well, if you are entitled to an immediate pension, then as part of your resettlement period, you will fill out AFPS Pen Form 1. It is this form that is used to apply for any immediate benefits, like pensions or the resettlement grant. More on that in a bit. However, as most of us will have a deferred pension, we must actively claim it around 3 to 6 months before state pension age. We do this by completing AFPS Pen Form 8 and sending it into DBS Veterans UK. The form can be found on the Gov website, and don't forget to do this. In the 2022-23 financial year, there were over 17,000 unclaimed benefits which are due. Over 17,000 people could be financially better off if they claim what is owed to them. I wonder how many thought they had to serve 12 years before they became eligible for a pension. Remember, if you serve at least 2 years, then you have a pension. So when state pension age approaches, claim for it. If you've only served a few years, then it might not be huge, but you've earned it. And why would you say no to some extra money each month? Speaking of money, how is the Armed Forces Pension Scheme 15 actually calculated? This is where we will go into a bit more detail on the career average revalued earnings or CARE aspect of the scheme. And this is important, because if you can understand this, then you will be properly able to compare other workplace pension schemes and you'll come to realise how generous this one is. So please, stick with me on this. Your pension starts to build up from your first day of paid service. Every year the MOD pays a contribution worth 1/47 or 2.128% of your pensionable earnings into your pension pot. This is known as the accrual rate. A couple of things to unpack here. I say pension pot, but there is no actual pot as the scheme is unfunded, as I mentioned earlier. It's going to be paid by the taxpayer in the future. I just use this term as it's the most helpful way to explain this. You might also think that it's 1/47 of your pensionable earnings put into this pot, which isn't a lot. For someone on 35k a year, 1/47 is just £745. This is where wording is important. The MOD pay a contribution worth 1/47. They don't pay 1/47. Using that 35k a year example, the MOD contributes to this pot the amount required to pay that individual £745 a year for life in retirement. That £745 is how much extra has been added to that individual's annual pension that year. Still confused? I'll give an example in a minute which should help. So, just over 2% of your annual pensionable earnings is added to your annual pension every year. But it doesn't stop there. whilst you were serving, something called indexation happens, and this is the revalued aspect of care. This is where the pot increases each year in line with the average weekly earnings, or AWE index. It does this to track inflation and maintain its value. Once the pension is in payment, it then increases each year with the consumer price index, or CPI. So whilst you're employed, it tracks the earnings index, and once you're no longer employed, it tracks the prices index. To put it simply, don't worry, your pension is protected against inflation and will maintain its purchasing power. An example to help illustrate this. Now, I'm going to use round numbers here to make the math simple, and we'll say the average weekly earnings index is 3% each year. Joe joined the army and earned £20,000 in his first year. 1/47th of that is added to his annual pension, which is £426. In his second year, Joe earned £22,000, so £468 is added to his annual pension, but first his £426 is increased in line with the AWE, which is 3%. So Joe now has an annual pension of £426 plus 3%, which is £439, plus the £468 from his second year, bringing his total to £907. Now in his third year, Joe earned 24 grand, of which 1/47th is £511. Before that is added, the 907 is revalued at 3%, bringing it to £934. Now adding on the £511, his new annual pension amount is £1,445. In his fourth year, Joe earned 26 grand. The annual addition to his pension is £553. The £1,445 is revalued at 3%, bringing it to £1,488, and with the addition of the £553, his new total annual pension is £2,041, and this continues throughout Joe's career. But if Joe was to then leave the forces during his fourth year, and disregarding any further indexation, he would have an annual pension of just over £2,000, or around £170 per month, for life from state pension age onwards. And considering this was just using round numbers with a constant AWE, the pension calculator has returned an amount not too far off my simplified example of just over £2,500 per year for a similar situation. Bear in mind the calculator also shows its projection in today's value, as it can't predict the amount of future indexation. The pension calculator, by the way, is a very useful tool. A link to a video on how to use it is below. After all of that, hopefully you now know that every year just over 2% of your pensionable earnings is added to your annual pension amount. Whilst serving, this then increases each year in line with the average weekly earnings index, and then after that the consumer price index. Now, perhaps you think 2% is low, especially when in civvy jobs the minimum employer pension contribution is 3%. But this is where you need to understand the difference between defined benefit and defined contribution, and when you realise how good our pension scheme actually is. Remember, the MOD make a contribution worth just over 2% of our annual salary. This means the actual amount the MOD contribute each year is much higher than 2%. Try 65.5% of our pensionable pay, and that is according to the Armed Forces Pension Scheme annual report and accounts, which is released every year. So in the case of our earlier example, over those 4 years, the MOD contributed £60,260 in order to pay for Joe's pension of just over £2,000 a year for life from state pension age. Now the MOD does that for everyone serving in the armed forces, and they project that in the financial year 23-24, employer contributions will add up to £4.1 billion. Like I said earlier, defined benefit pension schemes are very expensive, hence why they are so rare now. If Joe was a civvy on a defined contribution pension scheme, his employer would have only contributed £2,760 into his pension pot using the minimum employer contribution rate of 3%, using the same scenario over those 4 years. This should show you why defined benefit pension schemes are classed as the gold standard. As some extra context, only 2% of private sector employees receive an employer contribution of at least 20%. The other 98% receive less, the majority much less. I've provided a lot of additional context in this section. It's important because it shows just how generous our pension scheme is in comparison to alternatives out there. But you won't understand this if you take the word of people who don't actually know what they're talking about but feel the need to chime in with their uninformed opinion. When you understand how the scheme works, how it's calculated, then you are more accurately able to compare other pension schemes that are on offer when you go job hunting. And absolutely, that should be a factor when looking for a job. You may not care about it now, but you will when you need it in the future. So you should now understand that you probably won't be serving up until your 60th birthday in the armed forces. Your career will finish before then, which means you will become a deferred member of the AFPS15 and your pension will not become payable until state pension age. This means that for most who complete a full career and leave in their 40s, they'll have to wait 20 to 30 years before they can claim the pension, which also means you'll probably have to find another job for that interim period. If you're smart, you'll become a member of their pension scheme too. The more income in retirement, the better. Anyway, the Armed Forces Pension Scheme 15 actually offers a very unique benefit for this 20 to 30 year gap. It's called the Early Departure Payment, or EDP, and no other pension scheme offers anything like this, at least not in the public sector anyway. If eligible, you will receive a lump sum upon leaving the armed forces and a regular monthly income up until state pension age. And guess what? If you decide to claim your pension early at 55, this EDP income is still paid to you until state pension age. Now, this is a benefit which is entirely separate from the pension, and as I just alluded to, you must be eligible to receive this benefit. The criteria you must meet is at least 20 years of service and be age 40 or over when you leave. This is known as the 2040 EDP point. You must meet both of these criteria to receive EDP. Make no mistake, this benefit is a retention tool. Its purpose is to retain people, but also it is there to compensate for the fact that a full career to age 60 is highly unlikely for the majority of us. Now, I have done a whole in-depth video on EDP, which I will link below. Give that a watch if you want to know more, but here are the main highlights. Firstly, this is only available to regulars. If you leave before age 60 and meet the 2040 EDP point, then you will receive a tax-free lump sum within about 30 days of leaving the armed forces. This lump sum will be 2.25 times that of your annual deferred pension. You will then also receive a monthly income up until state pension age. This monthly income will be 34% of your annual deferred pension. This percentage does increase the more time you serve after the 2040 EDP point, but for more detail check out that dedicated video. Now, there is a thing called inverse commutation. This is where you would give up that tax-free EDP lump sum and instead convert it over to your EDP income to increase that monthly payment. Bear in mind that monthly payment is taxable. But to give you just a quick example of what you could expect should you do a full career and meet the criteria, here is the EDP projection of Joe, who served 24 years and made it to the rank of W01. He will leave the service at age 43. So when he leaves, he will receive a tax-free lump sum of nearly £48,000. He will also receive a taxable monthly income of £647. This is just the annual EDP amount of £7,769 divided by 12. He will continue to receive this income for 25 years, providing state pension age doesn't move from 68. Now, yes, this is not really enough to live off, and so you'd probably be required to get another job. But what it does provide you with is options. You might not have to work full time, it gives you more freedom to choose your next career path. Perhaps your partner earns a good wage and actually you can retire. The EDP provides a lot of freedom and flexibility that very few other pension schemes out there offer. This is not something you should disregard. Let's say that Joe has had enough and leaves just after his 15-year point. Well, in doing so, his annual pension is around £10,000 lighter, and he will also sacrifice around £242,000 in EDP income and lump sum. If he lives another 20 years, once his pension is in payment, then that is £200,000 that he has also missed out on. That is a lot of money. Now, some people say the AFPS15 no longer pension traps people. I say bullshit. It absolutely does, and it is because of this early departure payment. I have sat down with people who've been on the edge of signing off and gone through their pension projection with them. When they realised how much money they would lose if they left now, they decided to stay in until that 2040 EDP point. I'd almost say they were pension trapped. Now, there is a point at which the trap is sprung, and I personally think it's around the 15-year point. But there is another retention award for those who make it to their 12-year point, and it's called the Resettlement Grant. This is a one-off tax-free lump sum to help you resettle into civilian life. Again, like the EDP, this is only available for regulars. You must serve at least 12 years and not be entitled to EDP, an ill health award, or an immediate pension. You'll claim for this via your pension form 1 during your resettlement period, and at the time of recording the amount is £12,692. It does increase each year in line with our pay award. This can be spent on anything, and you should receive it within 30 days or so of leaving the armed forces. Whilst we're on the topic of tax-free lump sums, the Armed Forces Pension Scheme 15 does not offer an automatic lump sum payment when the pension becomes payable at state pension age. However, you can create one. This process is called commutation. You can sacrifice up to 25% of your overall pension benefits, and for every £1 you permanently give up, you receive £12 towards a tax-free lump sum. If we use Joe's full career pension projection as an example, 25% of 21,257 is 5,314, and multiply this by 12, and Joe could receive a tax-free lump sum of £63,771 at state pension age. His annual pension would reduce though to £15,943. There are a number of reasons to do this. Perhaps finish paying off the mortgage, go on a mega holiday, do some home renovations, help your kid out with a deposit on their first home, and so on. Regardless of the reason, should you wish to do this, then you need to fill in an AFPS Pen Form 9 6 months prior to your pension becoming payable. And once you make that decision, there is no going back, so make sure the remaining pension is enough. Right, the last thing I want to touch on is something called added pension. As mentioned earlier, the AFPS 15 is a non-contributory pension, meaning we do not pay a penny from our salary towards it. However, there is the option to, should you wish to do that. I have made a whole detailed video on added pension and whether or not it's worth it in comparison to investing. I will link it below. If you're interested, give it a watch. But the highlights are that currently you can increase your annual pension by £6,500 per year via added pension. Now, this is not the maximum you can contribute each year, it's the maximum you can increase your pension benefits by. For example, let's say your projected annual pension is £20,000 for life from state pension age onwards. If you contribute the required amount, you could increase that 20k to £26,500 per year for life from state pension age. However, the cost of purchasing that extra £6,500 might shock you. It depends on a number of different factors, all of which I go through in the more detailed video, so make sure to check that out, but you would be looking at a personal contribution of anywhere between £50,000 to £200,000. Bear in mind that the added pension you purchase does also affect the amount of EDP lump sum and income you will receive, as it is included in the calculations. If this is something that interests you, then check out my longer form video on it. It's a complex topic, and depending on your circumstances, it honestly may not be worth it. And there you have it. That is the Armed Forces Pension Scheme 2015. The pension scheme that, if you are watching and serving, you are a member of. I haven't touched on what happens if you were to die. That will be a dedicated video in the future. Hopefully, now you have a much greater understanding and appreciation for the AFPS 15. It is an amazing pension scheme. I do understand the frustration that some people have because of the change. Yes, the 75 scheme was very, very generous. I know that some of you based your decision on joining because of that scheme, to then only be disappointed because you didn't realise it changed. However, it's been nearly 20 years since that scheme closed to new members. We should not be comparing the 75 against the 15. It is not a fair or accurate comparison, especially as many people joining today weren't even born 20 years ago. The AFPS 15 should be compared to other current pension alternatives available out there in the workplace. And when you make that comparison, you'll realise that our Armed Forces Pension Scheme is one of the best f***ing pension schemes out there. Did you realise that the MOD contributes 65.5% of our pensionable earnings towards our pension? Do you have a newfound appreciation for the AFPS 15? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you all for watching. If you liked what you just saw, please hit the subscribe button up there. And if you want to see some more videos, click over there. See you soon.